Together.
That's right. That's right. So my name is Joe. I'm the creator of the From Slavery to Freedom Cabin tour. That's the wrong tour. That's the wrong place I work. Actually, I'm the creator of the Slave Dwelling Project. I find spaces like this all around the nation, and I ask the owners if I could spend the night in these spaces just to bring attention to them, because oftentimes when people come to properties like this, the focus is that usually a nice, beautiful big house on a property, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a story to be told there, but that's not the whole story. The rest of the story is here, in these spaces, because it was these spaces, these people who lived in these spaces who were the physical builders of those nice, beautiful big houses. They either cut down the trees that frame those houses, or they made the bricks that are now those houses, or their labor provided the wealth for those houses to be built. Okay, this space was built by Mr. Craft. It's called the Hugh Craft house. He was a surveyor. He speculated. You know, when Mississippi was becoming a state, it happened quickly. And because it happened so late and so quickly, a lot of technology was brought along in that process. So you see the way the boards are cut. You can see all that here in this structure. In this space lived approximately 9 people. You go into the other room, we'll get into some census information. Below, all of us would have been a smokehouse. So imagine this being your living space, and below you, you're smoking meats. So either smell like smoke or meat, or like both, smoked bacon or whatever the case might be. We have evidence that this space was built right around 1841. That house was built around 1851. So this house, this space, was built before that nice, beautiful big house. And this is called the Behind the Big House tour. So this space actually serviced the house that was originally built in front of it. So let's go into this space. You get a good picture? All right. So here's where I'm sleeping tonight, guys. Right here in this space. There's supposed to be others sleeping. There might be some others as bold as you have been. So we'll see. So I've got here some census information. Census. Of course, you guys know what censuses are. Counts were taken. You see the people listed here. You see people enumerated here. You know what's missing? The names. The names was not important. And this is a government document. Now, here's evidence of institutionalized racism right here. Because in this 1860 census, people are enumerated. Enumerated because our Constitution, in debating that Constitution in 1788 in Philadelphia, the Southerners wanted to count these folks as one whole. But the Northerners said, no, you can't count them as one whole. You count them as 3/5. So even counting them as 3/5 still gave the Southerners the advantage, because all they had to do was keep adding more. But of course, the Civil War interrupted that process. So you can see the physical evidence here of the people who lived here and how they were listed on the census. All right, so this building was built primarily to be the kitchen. The kitchen for that big house. That was the hearth. That's where the cooking would take place. You see the outline of what the hearth may have looked like. And you see that it's quite sizable. It is huge. These folks with the means to build such a nice house like that usually entertain people. And when people traveled back then, It was not a kind of an in and out. It was not a day trip. These people traveled. It took them a while to get there, and when they got there, they stayed a while, and they entertained. So that means the duties of the enslaved people, the cooks, whoever they may have been, was compounded by that much. So that's why that hearth exists. The architecture of the house dictates that the visitors coming in to see the enslavers would go through that front door and have a nice grand staircase to have access to the upper levels of those houses.
This is the ash wood that comes from the fire. From the wood turns into ash, and this is the ash hopper, and you add rocks and hay, and you add the ash wood, and you keep pouring boiling hot water into the ash hopper, and it turns into this, which you can really burn yourself. You can burn your hand on this. This here is lard. Back in the day, they would use animal fat from a sheep, pig, or cow. You will boil the ash, and then you add the lard to it, and you keep stirring it until you get a thick consistency. Then you mold it, and it turns into the actual lye. This is actually yellow coloring. Urine, animal or human urine, was another ingredient to use to make lye soap. Urine over time turns to ammonia. So either you can use it with or without the urine. This here is a dye, so if you want to dye your clothes. So there were 9 steps to doing laundry for the laundress. It was sorting, batting, boiling, wash, rinse, air dry, iron, mending, and folding. So it was impossible for one laundress to do the laundry. So she had other laundresses and children to help her with the task. So this is a bat, and this was used to bat out all the dirt before you boil the clothes. You will boil the clothes here, and boiling it will lift as much dirt and stains as possible. This is a batting, so you will stir this for at least a good 30-45 minutes. This here is a yoke. The children would help with the duties of the laundress, so the children will go back and forth to the creek, and they'll have this yoke around his neck, and they'll put the pails of buckets on each side. So they will go between 6 or 7 times a day to get fresh water for the laundress. And then here, they will wash here with the washboard, and then they rinse, and then put them here to hang dry. This is an iron. They'll use one iron while it's hot, and they'll have the iron right next to the pot. So once the iron gets cold, they'll get the other iron from the pot and then just keep switching back and forth. Rice water was used as starch to get the wrinkles out of the clothes. And in order to keep the irons clean, it will have to be polished every day so it won't rust like this. So this iron would not be used to iron. It has to be clean and not a lot of rust on it. So that was the responsibility of the blacksmith, to make sure that the irons are always polished, so when they iron, it won't look like this and mess up the clothes. And this here's a flutter, so it will give you pleats, either on skirts or shirts on the tongue, or on the sleeves. You have like those puffy sleeves. You use this as a flutter to give you pleats on here.
This is Carter, and I'm the president of Preserve Marshall County Holly Springs, Inc., the local preservation nonprofit. And basically, we're charged with the advocating for and pursuing the preservation of historical sites. Yeah, come on. Historic sites and structures and historical culture. And the Behind the Big House program is one of our educational outreach programs that seek to basically to advocate for the preservation of a very integral part of this the culture of the antebellum South, which is the giving voice to the long past enslaved people who basically made this much romanticized moonlight magnolias gone with the wind sort of antebellum lifestyle possible. And these are the people who basically toiled endlessly and lived in these humble dwellings behind the big house, out of sight, out of mind. And so we seek to give a voice to these long past enslaved people who had no voice in their history, and largely in traditional tours of historic houses depicting the antebellum South, they're largely silent still, because they're hardly mentioned that they had any part in this. whereas actually the entire economy of the South, which existed on cotton, that existed on the shoulders of a huge population of enslaved people who sort of made it happen. And so basically I like to say that if you're going to tell the story of the antebellum South and not include the narrative of the enslaved people, then you're not telling history. You're basically just trivializing things. And to be quite honest, it's a cultural genocide. You're treating it as if these people did not exist. And without them, this much glamorized antebellum Moonlight Magnolia's image, that doesn't exist. And so you can't tell one without the other. And that is what our program seeks to do, is to tell a fuller, more complete, and accurate historical narrative of this region and give these people their rightful place in our history.
Country Network here in Holly Springs, Mississippi in April, and the pilgrimage is going on, but this is behind the big house. Okay, and what we're going to talk to here today about is at the Burton Plantation, the Burton home here in Holly Springs, is about how bricks were made as for these large homes, these luxurious homes in Holly Springs, and these were the homes of the very wealthy. You have to understand that the homes like Burton Place, Earlywood, Walters Place in Holly Springs, only the wealthy could afford to build these extravagant brick homes because it was very labor intensive. Okay? So we'll talk about how the bricks were made. What's the one thing in Mississippi that you have in the ground? Clay. That red clay, right? And over here we got a bucket of sand, and I'll tell you what we're going to do with these. The clay is in abundance. And what you do is in late October, you get your clay out of the ground, or you go down to the riverbed and you get your clay, you find your vein of clay of the type of bricks that you want, the color that you want, and the labor intensive begins because you have to transport that clay back to your site. The clay sits out above ground all winter long and through the spring, and what happens in the winter is the clay freezes and thaws out. So it oxidizes, gets the oxides out of it, freezes and falls out. It sits out there until late spring, after the rainy season. What happens next? It's called the pugging of the clay. And so in a pit at your site, you put your water in your hole where you dug your clay out, or you dug a pit for your clay that's near your clay, and you put your clay in the hole, and the young men are out there pugging. They're stamping the clay. They're making it malleable. This goes on all day. Okay, and late into the night, you're doing this because you got to make that clay malleable, and this is a long process, takes weeks. And what happens is the debris rises to the top, all the sticks and the stones, all the stuff you don't need in the clay, it comes out. The next step is the molding process. This is a brick mold. This is a multiple brick mold. These are only examples. Okay, so you see how large this mold is compared to the actual brick. You can see that. That's because we'll get to it in a minute, the shrinkage. So the clay is brought from the pugging pit to the master brick maker. He'll form the brick in the mold, take a piece of wood, scrape it off, and what you'll see when it's scraped off, those striations is where it was scraped off. That's how I know, one reason I know this is a slave-made brick, because that's where they took the wood across the clay and scraped off the excess clay. Now what has to happen is these have to dry. So all across the yard here, on your left and your right, these bricks, the clay would be stacked, and the children's job would be to come along and rotate these. And you use gravity to get the water out of them. This is the drying process. The drying process takes weeks. Okay, because they're dried out here, they stack them in a herringbone pattern, like that, so the air could get through them. Okay, and then they would move them indoors in a barn, underneath a tent, any kind of structure where the rain and the water couldn't get to them, because they were continued to drying. This is still the drying process. It takes weeks. So, you're making that house behind you. That house could possibly take 150,000 bricks or more. The one over here on your right, the quarters of the enslaved, took this. I calculate about 30,000 bricks. Okay, so it's very labor intensive, and you have to dry these bricks out. The next step in the process is the kiln, where the bricks are fired. They're clay, they're not brick yet, they're still clay. So you build your kiln. Your kiln is 6 to 7 feet high, 8 to 10 foot wide, and it has holes in the bottom where you put your wood at. So you got your kiln stacked like this here. Okay? So the air will come through the bricks. And you have to heat that kiln up till it gets up to about 2,000 degrees to make the bricks hard. And you have to be very careful, because you bring the heat up too fast, the bricks won't get hard enough. They'll be brittle and they'll crack when you go to build your house. You don't bring it up at the right temperature, they don't get hard enough. Okay? And then the temperature has to stay at the 2,000 degrees for 4 to 5 days to fire the bricks. This is how you get your color in the bricks. Some of them are closer to the center, they have more burn. Okay? There's the oxides in this one, closer to the fire. This one here was better, more on the outside. Different bricks go in different parts of the building when you go to build the house. Very labor intensive. Now, the kiln, the brick master had no temperature gauges, no thermostats. All they had was their eyes, their ears, their sense of smell, and their brain. And they had to keep track of everything that was going on by sight, sound, and sense. No gauges. So you had to be able to tell when that temperature was 2,000 degrees by looking. You had to be able to tell that the temperature was coming down at the correct rate, so that those bricks wouldn't be brittle when they finished, or not be hard, not be hard enough. You had to keep, this was all a science involved in this. In the meantime, you're keeping track of the puggers, making sure that they're getting that done. The folks that are rotating the bricks, they're doing that. And then managing the logistics of moving the bricks off where they need to be stacked. And when it comes time to build the house, to bring your bricks that you made the last few years, 60, 100,000, whatever, when you get ready to build the house, you're going up. It takes years to build these houses, okay? So it's very labor intensive. There's a lot of science involved, and this is the contribution of the enslaved.